We're joined by Lib Dem leader Sir Vince Cable, who says it is needed, and Tory MP Chris Philp, who disagrees. So, Vince, you think it should go to a parliamentary vote. Historically, you have voted against military intervention.
No, we haven't.
I thought you had when going into Iraq. You personally had.
Iraq we did, but certainly in the case of Syria and the use of chemical weapons, which is the issue here. I was a member of the Cabinet in 2013 where we did support military action.
And you voted for military action?
Indeed, and I supported it. It was right. And there are many parallels with that, though, of course, the situation has moved on. But I think the reason why the Parliament...
The question I was going to ask is, if it goes to a vote and it's voted against military intervention, I guess the risk is that nothing is done.
Well, it would mean that Britain wasn't party to it, but of course it's an American-led operation. The French would still be involved. I mean, Britain is there largely to give political cover. It's not actually for military reasons. But yes, I think we have to listen to Parliament. I don't rule out the fact that, you know, my party would support it if the argument's properly made, as it indeed was made 5 years ago. And I think it was a mistake when we didn't do it then. But you know, the government and the Prime Minister have got to come and make the argument. There's a lot of popular worry about this escalating out of control. How do you deal with the Russians, and are we not drawn into conflict with them? How do we stop this escalating into a dispute with Iran, and then that leading into the arguments about nuclear proliferation? There is a lot of difficult questions the government has to answer, and it should answer them in Parliament.
So even if the vote, if there were to be one, would go against your own instincts, you believe that there should be a vote anyway,
Absolutely.
Even if that means on the public stage and in history we look like we did nothing?
Well, we have to make... The fact is that when... I think we made a bad mistake in 2013 in not censuring the use of chemical weapons. I think we should have gone ahead. The fact that Parliament said no was, I think, a mistake. But the argument has to be had.
Parliament was a mistake, or David Cameron should have just thought...
No, I think it was a mistake by Parliament at that time, but that's why we have to go over the arguments again.
Because it's likely, isn't it? People instinctively don't want to vote for military intervention.
We had a statement from Jeremy Corbyn this morning.
We've had a statement from Jeremy Corbyn calling all the negatives, but the public don't want it, you know.
No,
many members of the families of service people don't want it.
They're right to be sceptical, and I think in some ways it's a more dangerous position than it was 5 years ago because of the Russian engagement, and also because we've got President Trump, who is erratic, unpredictable.
So what do we do then? Because in a way, leaders have to lead.
Yeah, they have to lead, but they've got to make the case. She had to persuade her cabinet yesterday. There were quite a lot of sceptics in the cabinet, I understand, and she's got to make the case to the public through Parliament. That is the next step. It's not a timing issue. I mean, they could convene Parliament this weekend if they had to. We almost certainly on Monday.
So why doesn't she, Chris?
Well, there are a number of reasons why you might not. One is a timing issue, because if action is very imminent, there clearly wouldn't be time to recall Parliament.
Although Trump does sound like he's sort of scaling back a little bit on his urgency.
We'll have to wait and see what happens in terms of action imminently. And then secondly, of course, there are quite often intelligence reports which inform a government's decision, which can be heard by the Cabinet, but you wouldn't want to air more widely. And if those intelligence reports make a significant part of the case, the reason for taking limited, targeted action, then you wouldn't want to have to lay those out in public.
And the French president says he has seen evidence.
That's right.
Himself.
Macron has said he's seen the evidence and is convinced that a chemical attack took place. And of course, we saw the pictures on your clip just a few minutes ago as well. And the British Cabinet yesterday, having reviewed that evidence, some of which might be confidential, so, you know, signals intelligence, concluded it was highly likely a chemical attack had taken place. And I share Vince's view on that we can't stand by and do nothing when women, children, civilians have been brutally murdered by chemical weapons in the most appalling way.
You disagree that we don't need MPs like yourself to be going to vote?
I would be comfortable for the government to take that decision based on the intelligence they had without a parliamentary vote, if necessary, for the reasons that I mentioned. I think it is important that we do act in a precise and limited way. Now, Vince raised the concern about escalation, which is a fair question to raise. If we're very targeted by just taking action against Syrian chemical weapons manufacturing and storage facilities and against the Syrian Air Force units that delivered them, I think we can avoid the risk of any sort of escalation.
Is there any evidence that it would stop it, though? Because I think the problem is everyone is completely united in moral outrage, but everyone is very, very confused about what to do.
Well, look, I mean, no one can guarantee anything, and it'd be wrong to do so.
And historically, unilateral one-off military strikes haven't helped, have they?
Well, I mean, if you look at 2013 that Vince referred to, after the chemical attack then, Parliament voted wrongly not to take action, and for a period of years after that, Assad continued to use chemical weapons against his own people. About a year ago, the Americans took limited action, and for the 12 months following that, there was very little by way of sort of outrageous actions.
So it will be a yearly thing then,
well, I'm not sure. It depends what the action is like. But to do nothing, I think, is completely unconscionable. We have a moral duty to do what we can. No guarantee it'll succeed forever, but we have a moral duty to do what we can.
Will this dominate Parliament next week, do you think, when everyone gets back on Monday?
Well, it should. This is a life and death matter, and the dangers are enormous. So, yes, it should be. It should be on Monday as soon as we come back. I don't buy the argument, incidentally, that the intelligence issues prevent us debating this in Parliament. It's a very simple convention. I and the other party leaders could be given a briefing on Privy Council terms. We can then advise our colleagues in broad terms.
I'm not a Privy Councillor, so I wouldn't have the benefit of that. So most MPs are not Privy Councillors, and so the majority of MPs voting would not have had the benefit
Well, let's
of
see
that
if there
briefing.
is a vote. Vince, Chris, thank you very much for joining us this morning.